Published 2031 Eastern Standard Time, the 3rd of March 2018. Updated 2033 Eastern Standard Time, the 3rd of March 2018. It wasn't snow or ice that paralyzed much of Britain during the past few days. It was lawyers. A great swirling storm of ambulance chasers long ago descended on this country, blanketing common sense under a layer of solidified, litigious drivel. I strongly suspect it was a terror of litigation that caused me to be trapped pointlessly for ages in an immobilised train on Thursday morning and then forced me into a huge diversion to get to work 4 hours late. At one point, as I rambled round southern England in rattling carriages, I wondered if I might have to go through the Channel Tunnel to get to my desk. I had assumed that some astonishing unexpected weather bomb had caused my problems. But when I looked into it, I found that a few miserable deposits of snow and ice on the platforms of Paddington Station in London had led to the closure, for several hours, of Isambard Kingdom Brunel's Great Western Railway system. When I looked into it, I found that a few miserable deposits of snow and ice on the platforms of Paddington Station in London, pictured, had led to the closure, for several hours, of Isambard Kingdom Brunel's Great Western Railway system. How Brunel, that mighty engineer, who never saw an obstacle without wanting to overcome it, would have snorted with derision. I later checked with the Met Office, and they said the weather stations in central London had reported no significant snowfall on the night before. When I put this to Network Rail, they sent me a long statement repeatedly claiming they had faced extreme conditions, and offering this excuse: the station was not temporarily closed because of snow. It was temporarily closed because a combination of snow, strong wind and freezing temperature created sheet ice on the platforms and areas of the concourse, creating an unacceptable risk to station users, particularly passengers disembarking trains. They sent me pictures, showing a few pitiful patches of snow, as if these were evidence of a major crisis. I am not convinced. I think they are evidence of a fear of litigation. As for extreme conditions, what can they mean? Those of us old enough to remember the genuinely devastating winter of 1962-3 know what cold weather can do here. Then, there was a 36-hour blizzard right across the country, with 80 miles per hour winds creating 20 feet snowdrifts. The upper reaches of the Thames froze solid enough for a car to be driven across the river at Oxford. Even the salt sea froze 4 miles out from Dunkirk and a mile out from Herne Bay in Kent. The snow lay without a break for 2 months. In the north of Scotland, temperatures got below 0 Fahrenheit, what we would have called 35 degrees of frost, minus 19.4 on the boring, crude Celsius scale, which is really cold. That was a crisis. This isn't. But a terrible fear of being sued has turned it into one, helped by the intolerant and stupid green dogma which has closed and demolished most of our perfectly serviceable coal-fired power stations and brought us close to a totally needless gas shortage. Count yourselves lucky we still have some coal generation left, or there would have been serious shutdowns last week. Many will have jeered at a school head who told his pupils not to touch the snow. But I sympathize with him. G. Smith, from the Joe Richardson Community School in East London, flatly blamed the fear of lawsuits for his attitude. He told scoffing TV presenters reminiscing about their snowballing days, "What you didn't operate in is a society where the first thing that happens is a parent on the phone to a company to make that claim, and I'm responsible." A great swirling storm of ambulance chasers long ago descended on this country, blanketing common sense under a layer of solidified, litigious drivel. He is perfectly right, forced to be a ninny by a reasonable fear of the courts, imposed on him by insurers. The NHS is near crippled each year by compensation claims worth about £1.5 billion that it can't afford to fight, from lawyers on the make who are even allowed to advertise in hospital casualty waiting areas. I just wish more people would say so. It was a stupid, predictably disastrous legal change. It transformed us in 25 years from being a robust, risk-taking adult society into a cringing, risk-averse health and safety despotism, where you close an entire railway in case someone slips on the snow and sues you. For the record, this has nothing to do with human rights. It was done by a Tory government which in 1995 triggered the Conditional Fee Agreements regulations. Thanks again, John Major. It may have been hoping to save a bit off the legal aid budget, but the net cost to the country has been vastly greater. So, in the end, it's not the wrong kind of snow, or the wrong kind of wind. It's the wrong kind of law. You could call it Storm Major, since it is probably the biggest single monument of his wretched government. Still, we tremble in fear about Russia, which has no interest in us and in any case has an economy the size of Italy's. Ministers feel free to say practically anything about President Putin, and blame Moscow for any crime that's going How odd that they, and the panicking media, say so little about China, a real threat to the well-being of the planet. China's sinister leader Xi Jinping, a welcome guest at Buckingham Palace, has just declared himself president for life, a fact which Chinese journalists have now been sacked for reporting too prominently. His is a regime that maintains a prison camp gulag, imposes the death penalty on untold thousands after secret, unfair trials, censors its media, and patrols the internet for dissent. It is also expanding aggressively in the tense South China Sea, building huge and menacing new military bases there. China's sinister leader Xi Jinping, a welcome guest at Buckingham Palace, has just declared himself president for life, a fact which Chinese journalists have now been sacked for reporting too prominently. It hates any kind of criticism. It kidnaps publishers in foreign countries who bring out books critical of its leadership. It is slowly but surely strangling free speech, independent courts and protest in Hong Kong, in defiance of its treaty obligations. Even in Britain, I know of student societies who, if they dare to allow anti-Chinese speakers, find themselves mysteriously packed by pro-Peking Chinese students. Russia, by contrast, merely laughs at our attacks on it. We, who posture about Russia, do nothing about China's growing repression and real aggression. In fact, it is even worse. We are silent about Hong Kong. We have allowed China to force us to drop long-standing support for Tibetan independence, and to stop holding high-level meetings with the Dalai Lama. During President for Life Xi Jinping's state visit to Britain, itself an elaborate gouda to Peking, our police also treated pro-Tibetan protesters with astonishing harshness. It is so much easier to screech about Russia, than to face or challenge a genuinely menacing superpower. I asked the BBC how they could justify using propaganda footage, allegedly from the Syrian town of Ghouta, on a major news bulletin without any indication that it came from a partial source. They admitted they had done this. They admitted that it was against their rules. But I did not get the impression they were all that bothered, and I would not be surprised to see such stuff again. The BBC reports an awful lot of things from Syria which it has no way of checking, from supposed gas attacks by the Assad state to death tolls and films, generally of wounded children being rushed about the place by unarmed young men. It has completely abandoned any semblance of independence or impartiality. How then can it justify its license fee, collected on these conditions? Theresa May complains that the EU is threatening British sovereignty over Northern Ireland. The Blair government, backed by the Tories, gave that sovereignty away in its 1998 surrender to Gerry Adams and his friend Bill Clinton. I'm amazed at how few people have read the so-called Good Friday Agreement. Are they afraid of what they'll find? If you want to comment on Peter Hitchens, click here. Sorry, we are not currently accepting comments on this article.